Let's talk about dates. No, not those. Yeah, those. I mean, look how much fun they're having. Dates are great, right? Until they're not. Like, maybe he said, "Sup, bruh?" to your dad. Maybe she won't stay off her phone. Maybe he won't stop taking selfies. Maybe he said you remind him of someone special. His ex-girlfriend. Yeah, next. It can make you wish dates came with an escape button. But there's a way to make dating a better experience. We can have coffee without conflict. We can go to dinner without wanting to dash. We can save the date.
Okay, hey, well, thank you so much for joining us, Crosspoint students. I'm super glad that you are watching this as we continue on with the last week of our Save the Date series. We're just talking about what dating looks like, how we should walk through some of the basic steps of that. And so if you'll remember, our first week, we talked about Proverbs 24:27, and that when it comes to dating, it's better to become the right person than it is to find the right person. It's more beneficial for us to work on becoming who we need to be than finding the person that we're interested in or the kind of person that we're interested in. The week 2, we talked about how that we shouldn't make anyone our everything, and we looked at Ephesians 5:15. Week 3, we talked about how we owe it to ourselves to be honest with ourselves. When we talk about screw-ups and the areas that we just can't see and some of the struggles that we have, it's beneficial for us to be honest with ourselves, that we just can't handle it all by ourselves. So really, this week is a continuation of that, and so this will be our final week in this series, and I'm super glad that you're here. But before we jump into this, let's go over a few quick announcements to get you guys up to date on what's going on, especially in this crazy time. The first thing is that Super Summer is still going on, like we talked about last week, along with Falls Creek. Super Summer is a little bit different in that we have to do some early stuff. So if you are interested in going to Super Summer, you need to email me and contact me and let me know that you're interested. Before Sunday, we're going to have some things up and live online for you to get the forms and some instructions on how to sign up for interviews and stuff like that. So be looking out on social media for any kind of updates when it comes to that. Also, our small groups are going to go through, words are really, really hard for me right now for some reason. Let's try that again. We will be doing some small group changes, and so obviously you can't meet with your small group in person, so we're going to be looking at doing some Zoom meetings and stuff, so we'll get you guys that information through social media, so be paying attention to that. Seniors, you still need to send me your photos, so I need 3 photos, a baby picture, a senior picture, and something in between. You can send those to my email address, jyoung@crosspoint.tv, and I need those as soon as possible. And just want to encourage you, in this time where things are crazy and you have to self-isolate, we want you to be responsible and do what we're supposed to do in this time and try and not get other people sick and not get sick ourselves. And so I want you to know that that's not an excuse for you not to serve and not to use your gifts in the way that you've been created to serve the people around you. You just have to do it in a responsibly safe manner. Just be creative and think about some ways that you can serve your community, the people around you, in a way that doesn't expose you or your family or other people, but allows you to still be the person that you've been created to be. Find an area of need around you in a way that you can help out and just jump in and do it. But again, make sure you're being responsible and following all the protocols that have been set forth by all of our officials and health care workers. So if we jump back into dating, back like in ancient times, I don't know, like 20 years ago or so, in order to get to know someone, you actually had to do this crazy, weird thing, which was actually face-to-face talk to them, right? It's a little bit different. If you wanted to figure out what the person was like, you wanted to find out what they were interested in, you wanted to find out the food they liked, what kind of sports or music they liked, you had to actually talk to them face-to-face. It's a little bit different today. It's actually a lot simpler to get basic intel on someone. You can just go online to any of their social media stuff and search for it. It's not too difficult. I mean, we can learn a lot about people today by looking at their posts online. You can figure out what their favorite foods are, right? You can figure out if they like Chick-fil-A, right? They go to Chick-fil-A 3 or 4 times a day. At some point, we've all kind of done this, right? Even if we're a little embarrassed of it, we've taken a picture of our food because it looked really cool or, was something that we've never had before or whatever. Or maybe you just want to promote something that you really, really like. For instance, cotton candy grapes. If you've never had those before, you're welcome. Go try and find them. They're incredible. Grapes that taste like cotton candy. They're exactly what they sound like. They're awesome. Anyway, you also can find out what they're interested in, right? So if that looks like sports, athletics, or if it's band, if they're into music, what they like as far as artwork goes, maybe anime or video games or any kind of interest that someone may have, you can find out online because at some point they've either taken a picture in a uniform that they're wearing or they've talked about how the refs screwed up their game, their favorite NBA game or whatever in that situation. All you really have to do is just look online and you see what they're interested in. We also can learn about relationships though, right? Maybe you've got 1 million photos with that person that you're dating, or if you're like me and you're just not a photo guy, 2, right? So you go online and you can see who someone spends a lot of their time with, and especially on social media, if it's Facebook, right? You can see if they're in a relationship or not. But I'm not trying to creep you out with all this. I'm just saying that most of us have a lot of our business online. It's just easy to see, but there's one exception to that. Most of us do not want who we are interested in online. Okay, now here's what I mean by that. So some of you that are watching this, you and I in the past have had conversations about who you like, right? Like who you have a crush on, who you're interested in, who you would date, or who you find attractive, whether it was through actual conversations where you were telling me just like, hey, I like this person, or, oh, I wish this person was single, or, just kind of like little hints here or there. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put all of your names up on one side of the screen, and then on the next side of the screen, it's going to say who you like. So it'll say, like on this screen, Jerry, and on the other screen, it's going to say, likes Katrina. Obviously, I'm married to her, so that works, right? So here in just a second, that's going to go up on the screen. Okay. I'm just kidding. I'm not really going to do that, right? That would be incredibly awkward, kind of like that transition there. It would be incredibly awkward for that. We don't really want people to know all of our business whenever it comes to dating. It would be incredibly uncomfortable. And honestly, we don't want to broadcast everything, and that's okay. But what we have to understand is that there's a line that exists in our lives between stuff that we put out in public and stuff that we don't put out in public. And a lot of times it's the stuff that we don't put out for people to have input on that gets us into trouble. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is this main theme of not dating in the dark. Okay, we don't want to date in the dark. And so the same is kind of true for those of us who are already dating somebody. And so here's the first thing that I want you to understand. There's probably a lot of reasons why we keep our relationships low key. And here are a few of them that I think are kind of important. Number one, it might be an area that we're uncomfortable with sharing. Right? This is not an area that you just like everyone knowing all about your business. And the first reason, maybe because it's embarrassing to put yourself out there. You're not really one of those people that likes to be an open book. You're not really one of those people that likes to be like lovey-dovey and all mushy, and that's just kind of awkward for you, and so you just don't put it out there, right? Maybe you're talking to somebody, but you don't really know what that looks like yet. Maybe it's a new thing, and you're not really sure if it's going to lead anywhere or if it's going to be kind of short-lived. And maybe you can't put it out there because you're hanging out with somebody that you're not really sure if you would say or how you would define it if anybody asked you about it. Like if the two of you were, going and meeting someone and introducing them to your friend, right? And so the friend goes, oh, are you two dating? And one of you says yes and the other one says no. That's kind of an awkward situation right there, right? The second thing, so the first one would be you're not really, you're kind of uncomfortable putting it out there. The second one would be that it's an area that you don't really like input, right? It's an area that we tend to dislike input. Maybe when you first met the person, you wanted to hear what other people would say, right? That you wanted to have other people kind of give you a debriefing of what's going on or what you should think or what you should do in the situation. You wanted their feedback, but now that you've been in the relationship for a little bit, you kind of are like, okay, shut up. I know what's going on. I know how the person thinks. I'm good. I don't need your input anymore. Which leads me to reason 3. Maybe one of the reasons that we don't like input is because we're afraid that the people closest to us might disapprove of the relationship. Right? Maybe the person that you have a crush on doesn't really have the best reputation. But now hold on, he's different when he's with you, right? He's different when he's with you. He has this reputation amongst the school or amongst your family or, with the people around him. But with you, he's not that person, right? Or guys, the girl who's just, stuck up or whatever. But with you, she's not that way. She's nice. And so we don't really want people to know. We don't really want to put this information out there because we don't really want to mess with all the mess that's going to come with people knowing. And speaking of disapproval, I think one of the biggest reasons that we don't put that information out there is this. We're afraid our parents might disapprove. Now look, some of you, 100%, does not matter who you are dating, who you are interested in, who you're wanting to date. 100% your parents are going to disapprove. Best person in the world, parents are like, nope, not good enough. Not good enough for my baby kind of thing, right? But more realistically, your parents are going to see things that you either see and just are willing to ignore, or things that you don't see, and you know that they're going to voice that disapproval to you, and you just don't want to deal with it. It's a lot easier and frankly a lot quieter in your house if you just kind of keep that stuff to yourself. And so we also tend to kind of come into this area of thinking where we say, okay, my parents, I'm not really going to seek out their approval here or what they think or their advice in this area, because when they dated, covered wagons still existed kind of thing, right? Like dating is a whole different ballgame from whenever they were going through this process. So what can they tell me? Anything that they do tell me is going to be so outdated that it's not really going to apply to my life or my relationship. So I think we need to understand that these are some of our barriers when it comes to dating. And remember what we said about dating, right? Our definition for dating wasn't, just this one thing, because there are so many different terms. We're saying dating is having a relationship with a person that is closer than just a friend. Whatever that may look like, right? Whether you call that you're just texting or you're just hanging out or, you whatever the case may be, anything, a relationship of any form with someone where you consider them more than just a close friend is what we're going to call dating. So how are your parents going to really pour into you in this area if they don't have an understanding or an idea of what dating looks like today? And that's a valid point, but at the same time, we're going to talk about here in just a little bit how wisdom really plays into your situation, whether that's easy for you to understand or not. So just bear with me, and we're gonna get there. Okay. There are some really good reasons for you to not make everything in your life visible online. Absolutely, 100% true. But at the same time, I think we're smart enough to understand this process of how if no one knows what's going on in my life, that can lead to some really, really major relationship disasters. And you've probably, if you've dated anyone before, okay, or had any kind of relationship where it was just you and that person and you didn't have anyone pouring into your life and helping you with that, you probably understand what I'm talking about. And if you haven't experienced that, that's awesome. here are some ways to prevent that from happening to you in the future. Today, we're going to look back at the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, and we're going to be in verse 14. So if you've got your Bibles out there with you at home, go ahead and turn to Proverbs 11. So we're talking about a verse here that King Solomon most likely wrote. And so what he's talking about here, again, I want to remind you, he's talking about how some stuff that doesn't really necessarily look like a dating verse on the surface, but we're going to take the wisdom that's here in this verse and apply it to our dating relationships here. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Proverbs 11, verse 14, it says, "For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors." So immediately you're thinking, what in the world is going on? The first week, Jerry is talking about a verse that tells how to build a house and applies it to dating. And now Jerry's talking about a verse that applies to governments falling because they don't have advisors. How in the world does this apply to dating? I think it's incredibly simple. Advisors is not really an everyday language kind of word that we use or that we hear real often. But what King Solomon is saying here is that not having enough advisors in your life, not having enough people helping you make wise choices, because that's what an advisor is, will lead to you falling. I mean, look at what he says. For lack of guidance, a nation falls. So if we say replace nation falls with a relationship, right? For lack of guidance, a relationship falls. There will be missteps, there will be screw-ups, there will be hurts and things that you can't get back in that process. Those are caused by a lack of guidance. And so he says, here's the problem, excuse me, here's the problem. Let me tell you how to fix it. You fix it by having advisors. You win victories by having many advisors. By having people who will look at you and say, this is what's going on, here is my advice. Here's what I would do in your situation. And so if you don't have those people around you, Scripture is telling you that where there is no guidance, you will fall, you will fail. It's not you might, it's inevitable. It's going to happen if you do not have people around you pouring into your life. So not only does that happen in just everyday life, it happens in our relationships. Because here's the deal. If we only rely on ourselves for guidance and direction in different areas of our life, at some point we're going to fall. That's what he's saying. If we rely on ourselves for guidance and direction in different areas of our life, we're gonna fall at some point. It's gonna happen. So when we use only our perspective, things are limited. You can't see everything. Your viewpoint does not encompass the entirety of the world. And so I've got a little illustration to show what that looks like. So we're gonna turn the lights off here, okay? So the lights are gonna come down. Don't freak out. Your computer didn't lose power and turn off. We have this problem where we can only see our perspective. So if we say the world is the area of darkness around me, and my perspective is just what my light shines on, right? My little phone flashlight here, okay? All I can see is what I can see. I mean, that sounds really obvious, right? I can only see what I can see. Here's the deal. We don't get tripped up by things because we're trying to make a mistake, right? We don't screw up because we're trying to screw up. Most of us happens because we're solely relying on our own reasoning and our own understanding because we've kept other people in the dark. And all we can see is what we can see. And so we're using our own little flashlight to navigate through life, and that doesn't work very well because our flashlight only shines so far ahead of us. And some of us, it shines pretty far out there, but if we're honest, most of us, our flashlight really only shines just a little bit in front of us. Our perspective only goes just kind of like a hand's length in front of us. And so it's not really good to make big picture decisions with short-term visibility because you can't see the big picture, right? So we make these mistakes because we make better decisions and get less tripped up and have an easier time if we invite somebody else to shine their flashlight into the darkness around us and give us a bigger perspective. They help us see things that we couldn't see before. And it's especially true in our dating relationships, okay? It's especially true in our dating relationships because we only rely on what we think and what we see in a dating situation most of the time. Because we are enamored with the person, we've crossed the line from interest into infatuation, and so we only see things the way we want to see them or the way that we take them in, right? And so what happens is we miss the big picture when we do that. We don't see what's going on around us, and that leads us to make some poor decisions that we otherwise wouldn't have made. And these not so great judgment calls ultimately will lead to regrets. That's just the way that it happens. And so here's what we're saying today, okay? It's pretty simple. Don't date in the dark. It's like if you bring people in, the light illuminates around you, and now instead of seeing only what you can see right in front of you, you have this clear picture of what's going on around. And so here where I'm sitting, I've got a bunch of stage lights that now pop on, and instead of just being able to see what my little flashlight could shine on my face, you can now see me and the area around me, and I can see into the rest of this room. And so whenever we allow people to shine their light into our situation, it gives us a much better picture. Look, I'm not saying that you're stupid, okay? This is not Paul talking to the Galatians where he says, "Oh, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you?" This is me saying that we all struggle in this area at times. What I am saying here is that there's no way that you can know everything. There's absolutely no way that you can know everything. You cannot, nobody, absolutely no one can see everything from every perspective. Because that's the only way you'll miss mistakes. Where you will not make mistakes is if you have the ability to see everything from every perspective, to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and choose to avoid that situation. That's impossible. So what we have to do is make ourselves have the best chance of seeing those things when they come at us. And that happens by allowing other people to advise us in our relationships. Don't date in the dark because you only know what you know. It's a pretty simple concept. You only know what you know. In other words, you only know from what you personally experienced in your life. But here's the thing. There are people around us who have experienced life and relationships in a very different way from what you have. And it would be absolutely stupid of us to not utilize their wisdom in this area. I mean, these people have the ability to be helpful to you, to advise you in some areas to not make stupid, dumb mistakes. I'm gonna tell you, I've made a bunch of really, really, really dumb mistakes. And this is helpful whether you are dating now, plan to date now, or dating's not even on your radar. If we can grasp this concept, it completely changes the statistics when it comes to us making mistakes in dating relationships. Because I'm gonna tell you, there are a bunch of books out there that can tell you the better ways to date and the better ways to do this, but it doesn't do any good if we just let them sit on the shelf. Look, there are a bunch of people around you that love you and want to help you, that have all this wisdom and knowledge when it comes to dating. Whether you think it applies to the current situation in your life or not, you're never gonna know because you keep the books on the shelf. You don't engage with those people. Look, we have to come to a point where we understand whenever Solomon says that where there is no guidance, people fall. Where there is no guidance, nations fall. But victory is won through many advisors. We have to take action on that. Because it's one thing to sit here and know that, but if we don't ever do anything about it, then we're just somebody who read a sentence and it did nothing to us. We have to allow this to come into our lives and resonate within us, and then make the decision to step out. So how do we apply this to our lives to step out and actually make this work for us? How do we take what the word is saying and make it actually be visible in our lives? So I've got a couple of ways that you can do that. So write these down. The first one is to think of someone who could be objective. What do I mean by that? Think of someone who can be objective. Well, here's what I mean. We have a bunch of people in our lives that will really just not know us well enough, and they will kind of just tell us what we want to hear because they want to impress us or they want to be friends with us. Right? Like you've probably got that friend that you could say, I think I want to do this. And they would be all on board with that, even if it was a terrible decision, because they just tell you what you want to hear. That's not what objective is, okay? Someone who's objective is going to tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear, even if you don't want to, right? We don't want someone who just tells us what we want to hear. We want someone who will tell us what we need to hear, especially if it's something that we don't want to hear or that we need to hear. We need voices who will be real with us when it's necessary. So find someone or think of someone who is objective. Number 2, find someone who's older than you. Again, not saying that someone who is young is stupid. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying here is that there's a difference between someone who's had a few relationships in high school versus someone who has been married for 15, 20, 25, 30, 45, 50, go and increase by 5s there, I guess, years. They've been married for a long time. They have dated. They have this wealth of knowledge because they have experience with what you're struggling with. They've gone through what you have gone through. The details may be different, but the foundation and the structure of what you're talking about and what they went through are incredibly similar. It's the same house, just painted a different color. And we have to be able to understand that there is wisdom in experience. And so being able to have someone who has learned from their mistakes and is willing to tell you why and how it was a mistake for them can give you the information and the wisdom necessary for you not to make those mistakes. But you have to be willing to find someone older than you that has that kind of wisdom. And so the third one is to reach out, right? It's one thing to think about what this looks like, right? It's one thing to go, okay, I've got to find someone who can be objective. I've got to find someone who can be older than me. And then that person would be perfect. And then you never reach out to them. You're still in the same boat. You're still in the same situation that you were before, where you don't have that person pouring into your life. So you have to reach out, okay? And this is the biggest step for a lot of us. This is a hard step, because if you're not just a super confident, outgoing, extrovert, where you're just like, hey, I need to ask you if you can help pour into my life when it comes to dating. That's an awkward conversation. Who does that? No one does. And that's why we make so many mistakes dating. We've got to be willing to take a step toward finding this person, reaching out to them. Even though we know what we need, we've got to be happy to have a simple conversation with somebody and just ask them to pour into your life. And I'm not asking you to just go to some complete stranger, because you don't know anything about that stranger, so you don't know if they're going to give you sound advice or not. But chances are you interact with older generations a lot in your life. You know people from older generations. You know people that fit this category of what I'm talking about. And you have, on some level, a relationship with them where you're comfortable at least just having a simple conversation with them. And so just going to them and asking them, like, hey, I would love if you could tell me what it was like for you whenever you met your wife. What was it like for you dating? What was it like for you? Just have them walk you through some things. Just start a simple conversation. Ask them about, what went on during their life regarding this area. And it's going to be a little awkward at first. But if you take that step with someone that you know, someone that you're confident you can have a conversation with, it's not going to be as awkward as we think it is. It just takes getting into that moment, getting into that conversation. And then once we jump in and we're part of that conversation, it's not so bad. In fact, you learn a lot about somebody and you begin to form a relationship that you never really thought that you would. And that's an incredible thing. What happens is, I think we don't realize how vulnerable we are when it comes to this stuff. We don't realize how protected we are with this stuff. And so there are some fears that come with that. So I'm going to tell you this. You need to pick someone that you trust. And I'll tell you that our small group leaders are great people for you to reach out to. Because the people that we allow to be our small group leaders, we put them there because they fit certain categories. They will not put you on blast for things that happen in your life. They're not going to take your story and post it all over their social media. They're not going to take your story and gossip about you to the people around you. They're not going to laugh at you. They are going to love on you because they care about you and they want you to have a successful and happy life. And relationships can cause a lot of wrecks when it comes to this stuff. And so they want to pour into you when it comes to this stuff. You just have to be willing to have the conversation with them. And that's the hardest step. So reach out to them. You know who those people are. Reach out to them. And if you don't have their information, contact me and I'll try to help you get it. We will get you connected if you don't have the ability to do that yourself. You just have to make this hard step of actually reaching out. You see, but whenever when we reach out, we find the objective person. When this situation starts, it's really, really easy for us to go, okay, that's great. Thank you for that information. And we try to apply it a little bit, but then after a while, that desire for that person's input kind of fades away. So let me kind of tell you a little story about one of my friends in high school. So if this person watches this, which he may watch this, yeah, I'm telling your story, buddy. So here's the deal. I had a friend in high school who all the girls just flocked to constantly. Like every single girl wanted to date this friend of mine, right? And so at first, he would make sure that his parents approved of who he wanted to go on a date with before he would go on a date with them. And that is an absolute great practice. But he got out of practice with that. And so he started dating this girl that we were kind of all friends with at first. But then she kind of showed her true colors whenever we would all be hanging out and my friend would go do something else and she would be sitting there with the rest of our little friend group and she would just be kind of a jerk. And so at this point, we started telling my buddy, hey, this girl's kind of a jerk. She's kind of manipulative. She's kind of mean-spirited. Like, you should probably not date her for. He's like, no, guys, seriously. He just kind of ignored our advice when it came to this girl. And the more he dated her, kind of the crazier she got. And still, he ignored our advice. And so then one time, we were going somewhere, and he had to get his parents' cell phone. I was like, why are you getting your mom's cell phone? He's like, well, mine's broken. And I was like, what do you mean yours is broken? How'd you break it? This is like your fourth phone. What are you doing, man? And he was like, well, my girlfriend got mad at me and she grabbed it and she snapped it in half. It was one of those like little razor phones. You're going to have to like Google that, I guess. But it was like this little bitty, tiny, super thin phone. It was a flip phone and then you could like snap it in half. And he was like, she snapped my phone in half. I was like, dude, you need to end this now. It's ridiculous. It's only going to get worse. He was like, no, it was my fault. We were arguing and I should have just stopped. And I was like, dude, she snapped your phone in half. This girl has anger issues. What are you talking about? And he was like, no. So as they continued to date, one day he couldn't practice anymore because for basketball because she hit him with her car. Okay, you heard me right. She hit him with her car. They were arguing. He got out and she put the car in reverse and nailed him with the car. Didn't run, straight up run over him, but backed up enough that he had to sit out of basketball for a few days because he hurt his knee. The chick ran him over. And then his parents said, enough is enough. You're not dating her anymore. So then he broke up with her because his parents said to break up. If his parents did not say that, I'm confident that he probably would have continued dating her for a little while. Look, when we don't allow people to advise us and we don't take that advice seriously, bad things happen. Mistakes happen. I'm going to tell you, now it's funny because it's kind of a funny story with him, and we give him a hard time about it. But I'm going to tell you, he was torn up about that relationship for a long time. And it caused a lot of issues in his life, both with his friends, the stress that came from from dating the girl in the relationship itself, and then the tension that existed in their home because he and his parents would constantly fight about the girl. It's not a great thing whenever we ignore advice. We've got to be serious about allowing people to pour into us, to lean into us, to advise us when it comes to relationships so that we can avoid the mistakes that come when we only use our own perspective. I'm not saying you're going to get hit by a car. It's possible, as my buddy proved, but you can still make mistakes that you will regret. Look, some of you may be sitting here listening to this go, none of this applies to me. I have absolutely zero possibilities of dating in the near future. Okay, I understand what you're saying. But even if you're not dating someone, listen well. Even if you're not dating someone, the chances are really, really high that one day you're going to. Which means you can get a head start by finding the kind of people that we're talking about here. You can get a head start by finding the people that will be objective, that will be honest, that have wisdom, and you reach out to them and you can start building the relationship with them now. Because let me tell you something, you will never regret having a lot of advisors. Scripture says it right here. It says, in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. Right? Different translation says that victory is won through many advisors. We want victory and safety in our relationships. We don't want failings. We want victories. We don't want hurt. We want safety. That comes when we have a lot of advisors. Because who you date and how you navigate those relationships will impact other areas as well. And I know that sounds a little dramatic, but it's so incredibly true. So remember, dating is better when you don't date in the dark. Hey, students, I love you. Self-isolate, be responsible, stay at home. Oh, I'm up? Oh, well, that's awkward. My bad. We may want to start that again.